Hello everybody, this is Carl, reporting for thescannedretina.com. Today I'm here with Paul Nally, former judge and former police chief from Bartow County. And we're going to go over a sequence of events that has led to a lot of criminals being called out in the county of Clayton. And what we'll do is, if you don't mind, Paul, we'll start with the sequence of events that led up to that. And to start with, back in 2011 and leading into 2012, due to the research of the Clayton County Citizens Oversight Committee, we were finding some serious discrepancies in the bookkeeping for the county. One of those things had to do with money that was being removed from a special purpose local option sales tax. That money was specifically allocated for certain projects, nothing more. As it turns out, the first thing that we found was an invoice that was marked various, not even miscellaneous, but various. And it was for $50,000 in groceries. This was turned over to an investigator for the district attorney's office. The district attorney was Tracy Lawson. The investigator was Dennis Baker. This information, I was assured, would be looked into. Never heard anything about it. About a month later, we got wind of a deal where the county attorney, Mr. Jack Hancock, working with certain county commissioners, had taken $2 million out of that SLOST account for the purpose of buying a grocery store, an old vacant grocery store on Highway 54, just across from the Georgia Archives. That $2 million was not used for anything related to SLOST. This was specifically designed to purchase a building that was to be used as a staging ground for the television crews that were operating in the county. More particular, what was that movie name? The zombie movies that they were filming down there. Regardless, there was other movies being made too. So the county, through Jack Hancock, decided they wanted to get a piece of the action. Took $2 million out and bought this. At the county commission meeting, it was brought to the attention of the people and also the county board of commissioners that this happened. As soon as that information got out, Tracy Lawson came over to me, asked me if I had the evidence. I handed it to her, and that's the last I ever heard of it. They would not say, with subsequent calls, whether or not they had actually done anything about it. So the Oversight Committee learned at that point not to trust any information on allegations of criminal activity to the district attorney. So we had to take a different tack. Now we fast forward to 2016, and the Citizens Oversight Committee is now being made aware of crimes being committed by the fire marshal, chief of the fire department, and his underlings, wherein they were changing the response times to make the county fire department look better. They were falsifying records. Further, they were also taking these very same records and using them to justify taking equipment from one location to another when they knew that that equipment wasn't ever stationed at this place. They knew that the ISO people were coming to see what was at that location, so they had a heads up. They placed that equipment there to fraudulently show this ISO group what was going on. So that is a big one, and because it's a big one, the witnesses to this crime called me up. I did an interview with the witness, and also, at the same time, we went up to the Georgia Insurance Commissioner's office, also called the FBI, and went to see them. It's still in the hands of the Insurance Commissioner's office, and we're going to follow up to find out where they're at this point. But this information, knowing that the foxes, meaning the government, looking out for the government, typically don't take any action. So we decided to take this before the grand jury. And there is where the problem started. We were being stonewalled. We were being prevented from getting any information in the form of a letter addressed to the grand jury foreman into the hands of that grand jury foreman by the DA, by J. Dennis Baker. And that's where we stood. And then, after several failed attempts and being escorted around the courthouse, I brought you into the picture. And I'll let you pick it up from there.
Well, from that point, it occurred to me that you did in fact have a constitutional right under Georgia's Constitution and under the federal Constitution to petition the government for a redress of your grievance. And the Constitution of the United States does not specify which government agency a citizen can petition. Neither does the state of Georgia. So basically, it is left to the discretion of the individual citizen which government agency he believes can redress his grievance. Now, with that thought in mind, we come to the Georgia Constitution and we find that the Georgia Constitution language is more specific than the federal Constitution, in that the Georgia Constitution makes it plain that the governmental entity a citizen may petition is that agency clothed with the power of government for a redress of his grievance. Now that's more specific than the federal Constitution. When you are considering situations such as you have described, where evidence is turned over to those charged with the responsibility of investigation and prosecution of crimes, and that evidence either comes up missing or nothing is done with it, and there is no report to you of a disposition, what disposition was made of the evidence, then it becomes plain that the district attorney is not the person clothed with the authority to redress your grievance. Or if she was clothed with the authority, she was at least negligent and dilatory in pursuing the objectives of her duties of her office.
Knowing this, what was the last action involving the district attorney at the courthouse that we were involved in?
In considering what step to take next, it was plainly obvious that an attempt to get directly to the grand jury was the appropriate measure to take. And that direct approach is supported both by federal law and by Georgia state law and the Georgia Constitution, not to mention precedent court cases. So, with that thought in mind, several of the committee and myself went to the Clayton County Courthouse with the intent of handing a letter of introduction to the bailiff with instructions that the bailiff was to place it into the hands of the grand jury foreman, with the hope that if the grand jury foreman did read it, then we would receive subpoenas to bring our information before the grand jury. Unfortunately, although I did not know her personally at the first encounter with Tracy Lawson. Tracy came by us and said something in a low tone of voice which I understood, got the impression was directed to you. But I did hear her make the comment, a comment to the effect, "We're not having any of this here." And then she disappears. The security guard would not allow us to meet with the bailiff. So we leave and go back down the hallway and turn a corner, and we sit down on a bench to think about and discuss what procedure could be next, when I noticed several individuals I believed to be deputies come out that hallway that we had just come from and blocked any access to that hallway. I believe there were 4 of them. Momentarily down the hallway we were sitting in, here come Tracy and
Mr.
Baker.
Right.
And she is in a apparently frustrated state. And she just immediately begins issuing orders for us to get up and leave, that we're not going to get to see the grand jury. And I tried to introduce myself, and it took a moment to get that accomplished. And I did introduce myself as a former chief of police and as a former judge, and asked her if I could speak with her privately in her office. She finally said that yes, that would be okay, and then of course Baker interjected himself, and he instructed me that he was going into the meeting too, which really didn't bother me that much. When we got into the room, she pointed to a chair for me to sit in, and then she went over to her desk, and she has a very thick, small print version of the entire Georgia Code, all 53 titles. And she began babbling about it was her duty to take care of prosecutions and presenting cases before the grand jury, and which she's correct as far as she went. And I told her that since she had her law book down, flipping through it, I would like to ask her just to show me one state code or one provision of the Constitution which authorized her to be the only individual authorized by law to present evidence or claims of criminal misconduct to a grand jury. Well, she's flipping through her books. Well, about that time, Mr. Baker interjected his comments about how they, oh, excuse me, I do need to mention this. On the way down the hallway to her office, she was over against the right wall. I was over halfway in the hallway, and the Baker was behind me. And just before we reached her, the corner to turn to go into her office, she looked over her left shoulder and she made the comment to me that if you really were a police chief and a judge, you would know how things work. That was her words. Now back into her office. He made a comment about how things worked in Clayton County. And I just simply looked at him and asked him, I said, have you never read the words of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution? Well, instantly, while I was looking at him, the instant those words left my mouth, she slammed that book shut. I've had enough. She had threw her hand up and waving it left to right. I don't want to hear any more. Y'all are out of here. We're not going to talk anymore. So we got up and left, came back to you, and I informed y'all that it appeared to be a fruitless gesture to wait any longer. And of course, they were telling us, y'all got to get out of here. And so we all got up together, headed for the balcony of that floor. And as we were walking down the hallway, and I don't know if any of the rest of you heard this comment or not, but what made me, this got me mad. I mean, I understand public officials not being proficient in their duties. But one thing will get my goat, and this did it. This is the old proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. Tracy was walking up to my left, a couple of steps behind, and I heard her say, loud enough for me to hear, I don't know if any of the rest of you heard it, there is always a criminal prosecution for intimidating a grand jury.
Yes, I heard that.
That was a threat
Yes.
to a potential witness in a criminal investigation before a grand jury. That violates both state and federal statutes. So, after we got back outside, my mind was made up. There was going to be a prosecution. If nobody else joined in, I meant to prosecute Tracy Graham Lawson for her felonies committed in my presence, which that's one of the requirements of the statute 17460.
You were a little hot under the collar at that point.
I'm sorry. I had always, you know, it's a funny thing about being a judge. You have such a ingrained concept that no matter what happens, the world can come to an end, and you're going to maintain your composure. Your personal deportment will be beyond reproach. And I hate to report, I lost it that day. I lost it that day. I will not tolerate a threat of criminal prosecution from any public servant. Excuse me for getting on the stump, but
Well, that brings us up to the point where we exited the building, and you had one of the members of the team trying to calm you down.
yes, you was.
That was very interesting. Another member of the team had also done some recording of those conversations held in that hallway, so we have those to draw on.
I do need copies.
Yeah. And
I do need copies.
our lovely researcher over here will be more than happy to
God
make
bless
sure
you.
you have them. Most everything we've got so far has been documented either through audio or video or both. So anything that the opposition, for lack of a better word right now, wants to throw at us, we have our evidence,
Yes.
and there's no denying it. So we get outside, and there are a couple of television crews there that were there for other purposes. And the first one that we approached, first one that I approached, was Tom Jones from Channel 2, WVSB News. And we started talking to him about the grand jury and how we do have the absolute right to petition the grand jury.
Not only do we have a right to petition the grand jury, we have a right that's actually greater than that. If an individual comes across information or evidence of a criminal enterprise or criminal acts, and that individual understands how to structure a presentation of evidence, that individual literally can stand in the place of a state's prosecutor in Georgia. That is tied to your right to petition, to responsibly exercise speech, to assemble peaceably with the grand jury, and to be heard by them. That principle was announced in the case of Henry Lester in the 77 Georgia 143 on page 148, wherein Justice Hall made the observation that any citizen or person of lawful age may prosecute for offenses against the state And if he does not wish to be the prosecutor, he may inform one of the members whose duty it is to inform. Now here, from this point on, I got to paraphrase, where it becomes the duty of the grand juror who's been informed to let the rest of the grand jury know, and then it becomes their duty to investigate. Now, the one thing that politicians don't like about people getting to the grand jury is when a grand jury starts its investigation, the only law that covers what they do from that point forward is contained in their oath of office. And their oath of office says that they will diligently inquire and true presentment make of all matters and things touching upon their present service. That's the language. That's 400. That language is 400 years old.
Okay.
And under our Constitution, once they start their investigation, there is no government agent, no elected public official, from the governor to the dog catcher in the state of Georgia, who is immune from a grand jury sticking their nose in their business.
And to wrap up this particular segment, will you please explain what you were overhearing in the conversation with Mr. Jones concerning our trying to get access to deliver our stuff to the grand jury?
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, Tom Jones from Television 2.
Oh, Mr. Jones, yeah. Well, bless the man's heart. He's just like all other citizens. We all have our niche. We all have the things that we think we want to learn, and in his case it was journalism and probably video journalism. But he expressed a bit of dismay that citizens had the right to present evidence to the grand jury without the district attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And his comment was, I'm going to have to discuss this with one of our law professors. And I told him, I said, well, by all means, let me know, and I'll be happy to sit down with you and your law professor and help you understand the full scope, the depth, the breadth, the sheer magnitude of the power of a grand jury in Georgia. I never did get a call from him, but probably won't.
And that's going to wrap up the first section of this interview, and we're going to proceed on to the events that happened after that. We'll be talking to you in a little while.